welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessikah with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, obviously, because I just said that. And I am undercaffeinated and here with an amazing author who I've spoken to before. This is, what number book is this for you?
3.
So this is her third book. And this one is super great in so many ways. I can't wait to start talking to you about. But before we continue, please let everybody know who you are and about this book that you are about to release.
So my name is Rachel Harrison. I'm the author of The Return and Cackle, and my new book, Such Sharp Teeth, is out October 4th, and it is about Rory Morris, who is a confident, independent woman in her late 20s, who reluctantly returns to her hometown when her twin sister, Scarlett, calls her and says, I need you. Scarlett is pregnant and estranged from her longtime partner. So Rory comes home to the town she said she'd never go home to, and runs into an ex-friend who always had a crush on her, but Rory's not really about that life. But maybe now as an adult, she's feeling something toward him. But the night that she sees him again and starts to entertain these feelings, on the way home, she hits a mysterious animal with her car, and she gets out to investigate. She is attacked. And after this attack, she starts to change physically, and it prompts a little bit more introversion from somebody who kind of has been go, go, go and refuses to confront her feelings. So it's a physical and emotional reckoning, and it's part body horror, part romantic comedy, and of course there are werewolves.
So last time it was Witches, which
Yes.
was great also. I love that book so much. And before that, I don't think we can really define what that was. I love The Return so much, but I can't be like, oh, it was zombies, or because that was a little bit more of a I guess a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah, that creature, it was like kind of based on a Wendigo. It was part vampire, part zombie,
like a cryptid. Like,
yeah,
there was cryptid in it. But this one is definitely a werewolf book, and I really loved it for a lot of reasons. So Scarlett is pregnant, and all you know is she had this partner who Rory thought was great, but maybe not so much because he's MIA. And Scarlett just doesn't really want to address why exactly what happened. She has some other trauma from her past that she is sort of always dealing with in the back of her mind, and maybe that's why she doesn't necessarily know if she wants to connect or not. With Ian, who's her former friend, and like, one of the things that was really great about this book was, so it is a really good werewolf story. Like you mentioned, there's a little bit of romance in it. She also has like other friends from the past that kind of come in and out of the story. There's a family aspect to it, but there's also like this whole underlying plot about controlling your body, and that I thought was super interesting to tell in a werewolf story, because Scarlett is dealing with things that happen when you're pregnant, and having been pregnant, and I know everybody has a different experience, but I totally understood what she was going through. Your body and your mind are sort of, I don't want to say co-opted, but co-opted. You're sharing space, basically.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even recognize yourself in the space that you're sharing. And that was very interesting when played against the story of Rory, who is dealing with that in similar ways.
Yeah, I think their experiences kind of mirror each other. And I think their physical changes really force them to kind of sit in their feelings in a way that they are not good at. They don't like to be vulnerable. They kind of are just like, we're going to pretend nothing bad ever happened and move on with our lives kind of people. And they can't do that. They can't escape into other things because they are very much in their skin, and kind of trapped in their bodies and feeling that. And so there's nowhere else for them to go but inward. And so they're both kind of on this journey. Rory a little bit more so in terms of things that have happened in her past, but they can't sweep things under the rug anymore because of the physical transformations they're going through.
Absolutely. Like I really thought that it was a refreshing take on a werewolf story to sort of parallel it with the story of a twin sister going through a pregnancy, but also about bodily autonomy. There was so much, about that. And I mean, Rory never asked to become a werewolf. She did not want to become a werewolf. This was something that was sort of put upon her. And she does not have, she does not know how to control it. She doesn't even know why it happened. There was so much rage and so much interesting subtext in that part of the story. How did you kind of come to it? Did you know you wanted to write a werewolf story, or did certain things going on drive you to it?
So the origin of I came up with the idea where all good ideas are born, which is in the shower. And I think it was one of those days where I was probably like shaving my legs and I was just like, it's so much work to have a body. Like I have to take care of this this body still. And just feeling, I think when you're younger and you go through puberty, you're like, oh, well, when I'm an adult, then things will get easier. And it just never gets easier to exist in a body. Like it just never does. And I think I was reckoning with that a little bit. And then specifically the experience of being in my body and you know, femininity and all of that. I was like, how come there aren't more lady werewolf stories? It seems pretty apt, like changing once a month and, certain lack of body autonomy. And so that's kind of where I started exploring. And as I started writing, I think some other things rose to the surface and there was more like usual. I kind of don't know what I'm trying to say until I've said it. And then I'm like, oh, there's that too. So there's a lot going on. And I just think in general, horror and monsters, they're good avenues to explore real, honest, non-supernatural experiences.
Oh, I just loved it. It was really, really good. And I liked how you didn't put everything out on the table right away, as to what was happening, as to why Rory kind of addressed certain things, especially like relationships and connections, the way that she did. And just even like with her sister, and like I thought that it was interesting the change, how you kind of depicted it, the werewolf change itself. Did you like, do you know a lot about werewolf lore? Did you learn a lot more when you were getting ready for this book?
I learned a lot more. I bought a book called She-Wolf, which was edited by Hannah Priest, I believe. And I was kind of reading about that. I mean, I'd seen like werewolf movies before. I love Ginger Snaps. But I hadn't seen Ginger Snaps since I was a teenager, I think, and I hadn't kind of revisited werewolves until I had this idea, and then I kind of steeped myself into it. And an American Werewolf in London, that transformation scene really, if you've ever seen it, it sticks with you. And so I watched that scene, like the YouTube clip of that scene, over and over again, just because of the way that it is so excruciating. And I wanted that to really hit, because it's different when on screen you can kind of see it and hear it, but how can I put that on the page in a way that a reader will read it and be like, ooh. Not for the gross out part, but just like the complete lack of control and the pain of it. So yeah, I watched that scene quite a bit, and I did immerse myself in werewolf lore while I was writing. And there's so, I mean, I probably only dipped a toe in. There's so much. Not a lot of lady werewolf. There is some, but not as much as you would think.
Yeah, well, I mean, just thinking about it in general, and you're talking about shaving your legs before, maybe there isn't a lot of lady werewolf stories because it is grittier, and it's easier to sexualize a female vampire than somebody who gets hairy once a month.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in this book that I thought was fun to write was, Rory's like, always smells like wet dog, and that she's like, downing hot dogs, like but she's a very like confident, like very comfortable in her sexuality, like she owns it. So I think that was kind of fun to play with, where this idea of femininity is being like smelling like roses and like being smooth and small, and she's got rage, and she's hairy, and she smells like, some of that stuff is against this socially acceptable idea of femininity, and so that was fun to play with.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think I think it could be, I don't know, a lot of fun to read more lady werewolf stories. But again, like, you are really thinking about it, or at least I'm really thinking about it. The body autonomy connections, like, just really just kind of hit me, because they don't really do that with vampire stories. Like, and I'm not knocking vampire stories, but where there are a lot out there. And it is almost like you become like hotter and more alluring, and like you're frozen in this time where, I don't know, like suddenly your skin is perfect. But like, again, like with werewolves, like considering, as you were saying, like what femininity is supposed to be, it's like the complete opposite. Like there is hair and dog breath.
And space, like,
Yeah,
werewolves are big, and I think with vampires, you're still your same size as you are. You're still the kind of human-esque, and it's less violent. I think werewolves are way more violent.
right. They're like they like animals. That's,
Yeah,
they really, they kill like animals because they are.
yeah, and I think in general, men are encouraged to be more brutish, and women are discouraged from that. And so it was fun to write a story about a woman, and as much as she didn't choose this for herself, to have these moments where she's just like, as the werewolf, where she can rip everything apart, and like part of her likes that, and like, how does she reckon with that? Like, this is not, is this a good thing to be? How can I control this? And you know is this the path that I want for myself? And so, but it was fun at some points to be like, imagine like to have that kind of like raw animal power that Rory has as a werewolf.
I also liked how you kind of examined the whole idea of her trying to explain this to people, and that was another really interesting thing that you sort of set against like people believing women and their trauma in general, not to really just give away the entire story because I really don't want to, but just on a very general level, I mean, when she is like telling people like I'm a werewolf, or specific people, like, listen, like we need to talk about this, and they're just like, no, I think you need to see you need to seek therapy because that's not possible. It's almost like a very absurd way of looking at something very serious, like when a woman wants to talk about something traumatic that happened, or that somebody is harassing her, or just in general, and people are like, yeah, I think you read that wrong. Yeah, no, he's just like that with everybody. Oh, maybe he just likes you. It's that's not possible. That he would never do that. And it was just a really great way of examining that, because if you were to switch that out with, oh, I'm a werewolf, of course people would say that, but in very real situations where basically you're being preyed upon, people say the same thing.
Yeah, and I think also it's not to give too much away, but the people closest to you, I think you kind of expect them and rely on them, and of course they'll believe you, but if they don't, it's more painful. But it's also for them, they can't accept certain, like, it's not just difficult for you, it's difficult for them. And so that dynamic can become very complicated, and was something I wanted to explore in the book. But yeah, I think, and I also, it was important for me to have Rory tell somebody at some point, because you can't, that's like a big secret to keep. And so I didn't want her to go through the whole book and not have anybody find out to the end, or have her just keep it under her hat until the end. But in the kind of technicality of telling a werewolf story, there was again a lot of meaning to be woven in under that, and parallels. So again, I just think monsters are such great avenues for speaking the truth.
Do you want to do another monster book after this? I don't know if I would even consider, though, Sophie a monster. Like, she's a witch and she did some monstrous things. But man, I loved her. I wanted to be her best friend. And I totally hang out with Rory too. It was just a different experience I had reading this one, and they were both lovely.
Rory's fun. She's pretty fun. I'd like to imagine Rory and Sophie hanging out together. I think they would be trouble.
I think they would be super trouble, but I think it would be trouble in the best way.
It would. I do kind of imagine all my books taking place in like the same universe. But yeah, I think I will write another monster book. I mean, I hope to have a long career. And so at some point, like I don't think the next book is not a monster book. But maybe book 5.
Angling for the answer to that. Like, what monster are you writing about next? But yeah, no. So the next one is not a monster book.
No, the next one is more of a like complicated family, maybe a touch of cult book. So that I can tease, but there's no vampires yet. Maybe book 5.
Well, this was super fun. And I am really happy to have read it. It was very, very good. I think your audience is going to love it, and new audiences are going to love it too. So we look forward to sharing it with the library, sharing it with our readers, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
I'm happy to be back, and hopefully this time next year we'll catch up again.
Yes, please. All right. So once again, this was Jessica with Turn the Page Podcast, Syosset Library. Our guest today was
Rachel Harrison.
And we are going to close this chapter.
it's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.